The year was 1865, and the wind blew like it had a grudge. Dust rode the air in thick, biting swirls that scoured the open plains and rattled through brittle cottonwoods. The land had gone thirsty long before the war ended, and now it sat cracked and sullen under a hard sun, waiting for either rain or ruin. Thomas Granger stood at the edge of his porch, hand on the butt of a rusted shotgun, staring across the empty stretch of ranch that used to hum with cattle and color. Now it was just dirt, fences falling apart like old bones, and the hollow ache of a home losing its fight. He didn't hear the wagon at first, just the creak of wood and the soft, broken rhythm of hooves. Then came the silhouettes through the dust, one lean figure on the driver's seat, five smaller ones huddled behind. They looked like ghosts at first, rising out of the ground. Thomas narrowed his eyes. Visitors were rare. Unwanted ones, even more so. The wagon came to a stop without invitation. The woman sitting tall in the seat had sunburned cheeks and a jaw clenched against pride. Her dress was torn at the hem, boots caked in travel, and her eyes, damn, those eyes were sharp despite the miles. She stepped down, her movements slow but certain. "Mr. Granger?" Her voice had a rasp to it, the kind that comes from dust and too many nights with no fire. He didn't answer, just nodded once. "I'm Clara May Walker. Preacher Jensen said you might be needing a hand." Thomas took in the sight of the five children behind her, all under 10 by the look of them. Dirty, quiet, wide-eyed. One of them clutched a ragged doll. Another dragged a busted tin pail. The smallest child looked too tired to cry. "I ain't running no orphanage," he muttered, spitting into the dirt. Clara didn't flinch. "I'm not a skin charity. I can work. They can help. Just need a roof and a bit of water." He turned back toward the porch, staring at the sagging roofline and the heap of firewood he hadn't had the strength to split. "You bring tools?" "A hatchet, a sewing needle, and more grit than most men I've met." That almost earned a smirk. "Almost. You can stay the night. But come first light you roll on." "Fair enough," she said, and turned back to settle the wagon. That night, the storm hit harder than any in weeks. Wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and dust came like a vengeance. Thomas tried to sleep, but the wind clawed at the shutters, and through it he heard the kids crying softly in the barn. The door banged open around midnight, and he found Clara huddled with her children under a moldy horse blanket, her body stretched across them like a shield. "You'll die out here," he grunted, motioning toward the house. She didn't argue, just gathered her brood and followed him inside. He gave them the old parlor, now nothing more than a bare floor and a cold stove. Clara thanked him with her eyes, but said nothing. Morning broke harsh and gray. Thomas rose to the smell of bacon, real bacon. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Clara at the stove, apron tied around her waist, the kids lined up with tin plates in hand. One of the girls had swept the floor. Another was gathering eggs. "I found the last slab in your cellar. Hope you don't mind," Clara said, not looking up. He didn't answer. Couldn't. He just sat at the table and let himself feel something he hadn't felt in months, full. After breakfast, she handed him a list. "Your saddle needs restitching. Fences are out along the south line. Chickens are laying in the wrong place. I'll fix the coop. We'll be gone in 6 days. But while we're here, I'm working." "You don't know this land," he said. "I know what survival looks like," she shot back. And she did. Over the next few days, Clara worked harder than any man he'd hired in years. She repaired torn tack, hauled water, patched his coat without being asked. The children fell into rhythm, too, small hands busy in chores no one complained about. One boy, Jacob, stuck to Thomas like a burr, quiet, curious, always watching. Thomas tried to keep his distance. They were just passing through. Survivors like him. No place in his heart for false hope. Still, it got harder to ignore the way Clara moved through the house like she belonged. The way her laughter, rare but rich, made the kitchen feel alive again. It was on the 5th night that the banker came. Dust puffed under hooves as the rider approached. Thomas watched from the barn as the man dismounted. A sleek fellow in a black coat and a too-clean hat. He didn't tip it. "Granger," the man said, "clock's ticking. You've got 2 weeks to make the next payment." After that, we foreclose." Thomas said nothing. The banker looked toward the house. "Got company, I see. Charity won't save your land." Clara stepped onto the porch, a dish towel in her hands. She stood like a fence post, solid, unmoving. "Good evening," she said, calm but cool. The banker ignored her, remounted, and rode off with a smirk. Thomas didn't go back inside right away. He stayed by the barn, staring at the fading tracks in the dust. When Clara came to him, she didn't speak at first, just stood beside him, arms folded. "You in trouble?" He nodded. "How much?" "Too much. You can't do it alone." "I've done everything alone," he snapped. "Since the war. Since Mary died. Since the land turned on me." Clara flinched just slightly. Then she straightened. "And how's that working out for you?" He didn't answer. He just looked out over the fields, empty and cracked. "We've got hands," she said softly. "We've got ideas. There's more than one way to keep a ranch breathing." "I didn't ask for a family," he muttered. "No," she said. "But sometimes the right things come when you're not a skinned." Thomas turned away, jaw tight. He wanted to say no. Wanted to send them packing before they rooted too deep in the soil of his heart. But the sound of laughter from inside, the kids playing some silly hand game, stopped him. He hadn't heard that sound in months. He looked back at Clara. Dust swirled between them. "One more week," he said. "No promises." She smiled just barely. "That's all I need." And the wind rolled on, carrying the scent of bacon grease and hope. By dawn, the ranch stirred with life, real life, not just the aching groan of wood and wind. Chickens scratched in the dust, horses nickered in the corral, and the sharp ring of an axe echoed through the morning fog. Thomas stepped outside, shotgun in hand as always, and saw Clara splitting logs behind the barn, sleeves rolled up, braid tied tight. The kids were already about, mucking stalls, hauling water, chasing each other barefoot across the yard like they'd always belonged here. He wasn't sure when it happened, but the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. Clara wiped sweat from her brow and glanced up. "Mornin'." Figured the stove'd be easier to keep going if there was wood near the porch. He nodded. "You didn't have to." "I know," she said, "but I want to." Later, over coffee thick enough to chew, Clara pulled out a small jar of berry jam, sun-beaten and sticky, but homemade. "Kids picked wild chokeberries down by the creek," she said. "I boiled them with what sugar I had left. Thought, maybe, you could trade a few jars in town. For flour. Or nails." He took the jar, turned it in his hands. It had been years since someone offered him something made with care. He felt a strange tightness in his throat and didn't know what to say, so he grunted and took a bite of cornbread instead. The day passed in sweat and dust. Jacob followed Thomas around again, asking questions in that quiet, curious way that never grated, only settled deep into Thomas's chest like an echo from long ago. "How'd you learn to fix a fence so fast?" the boy asked as they wrestled a rotted post into place. "Had to," Thomas said. "This land don't wait for slow learners." Jacob nodded like he understood that. He probably did. They were heading back toward the barn when the scream split the air, sharp, sudden, and far too close. Thomas dropped the hammer he was holding and ran. Clara was outside the coop, rifle in hand, eyes wild. "Coyotes," she gasped. "They got in." "I tried." A flash of gray darted across the yard, snarling. Thomas raised the rifle and fired. Dirt kicked up behind the beast. It was fast, faster than he remembered. Another came from the side, lunging toward one of the girls. Jacob moved first, shoving his sister out of the way. Thomas fired again. This time, the shot connected. The animal yelped and collapsed in the dust. The rest scattered. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Clara dropped her rifle and rushed to her children, checking them, counting them, holding them. Thomas bent to where Jacob stood, arms trembling. "You all right, boy?" Jacob nodded, jaw tight. Didn't want it to get her. "You did good," Thomas said, his voice hoarse. Clara sat in the dirt, holding her youngest like she might float away. Tears tracked down her cheeks without permission. Thomas crouched beside her. "You protected them." She looked at him, mascara smudged from the dust. "I protect what's mine," she whispered. That night, They buried the dead chickens and lit a fire out front. No one ate much. The air still smelled of blood and fear. Clara stared into the flames, her voice low. "We've been running since Missouri. Wagon burned. Then the sickness. Then the cattle thieves." Thomas didn't interrupt. "I buried my husband under a cottonwood tree with a shovel that snapped halfway through," she continued. "Then I just kept going. Couldn't think. Just kept their feet moving." He didn't know what to say, so he handed her a cup of coffee. She took it without a word, eyes glassy. "I thought maybe if I just kept walking, God would give us a place to stop." "You found one," he said, almost too soft to hear. She shook her head. "It ain't mine. It's yours. And you owe the bank more than you can dig out of this soil." He glanced at the dark sky. "So what? I let him take it?" "No," she said. "You fight, but not alone." Thomas studied her face, the way the firelight caught the curve of her cheek and the crack in her lip. She was hard as fence wire, but there was something gentle beneath it, something warm. He reached out, touched her hand. She didn't pull away. "I ain't good with people," he said. "Ain't been since." "You don't have to explain," she interrupted. They sat that way for a while, silent but not alone. The next morning, Clara dragged him into the barn. "We need a plan," she said. "We can't just shoot coyotes and hope the bank forgets UOM. "What kind of plan?" "We sell 2 of your Mustangs. Trade the jam in town. I can sew. Sell mended clothes. You've got land, chickens, livestock. All we need is a way to move it." Thomas rubbed his stubbled jaw. "You make it sound simple." "It's not, but it's a start." "I ain't never run a home, Clara. Not with kids. Not like this." She smiled, but it was sad. "Me neither. But I'd rather build a broken home than keep wandering through dust." He looked at her long and hard, then nodded. They hitched the wagon just past noon, loaded with jars of jam, a few repaired boots, and a single sack of fresh eggs. 2 horses followed behind on leads. Clara sat up front, her oldest daughter beside her, eyes bright at the idea of town. Thomas mounted his own horse, riding ahead but not too far. When they reached the main street, heads turned, some in curiosity, others in judgment. Clara walked straight-backed, eyes ahead. She bartered with the merchant like she'd done it 100 times. Eggs for flour, jam for lamp oil, a pair of patch trousers for 2 tins of coffee. No hesitation, no shame. One man offered to buy the horses for 1/3 less than what they were worth. Clara smiled sweetly and told him to take his dishonest mouth and go water the pigs with it. Thomas laughed for the first time in months. As the sun dipped low, the wagon loaded with fresh supplies and a few silver coins, Clara turned to him. "We can do this. We just have to keep going." He looked at her, not at the wagon or the goods or even the children, just her, and something inside him shifted. "You might just be the stubbornest woman I've met," he said. "And you, the grumpiest man," she replied. "Fair," he said. Back at the ranch, they unloaded quietly. The wind picked up again, dry but less bitter. As Thomas lit the lantern, Clara's hand brushed his. They both froze, then let the touch linger. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like something waiting to be rebuilt. Outside, Jacob hung the saddle on the post like Thomas had shown him. The boy looked back and smiled. Thomas returned it, slow but sure. The land was still cracked, the debt still looming. But something else had taken root now, and this time it might just hold. The trail back from town was long and quiet, broken only by the rattle of the wagon wheels and the distant cry of a hawk circling above. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon. Thomas rode beside the wagon, reins loose in his hands, lost in his thoughts. They'd made good trades, better than expected, but the weight in his chest hadn't lifted. The bank deadline still loomed like a storm cloud, and men like Callum Brantley, the loan officer, didn't wait patiently. They crested the final ridge just before sunset. That's when they saw it. Dust. Riders. Coming fast. Thomas cursed under his breath. He spurred his horse forward, waving for Clara to stop the wagon. She stood up, squinting. "Who is it?" "Brantley," he growled. "And he's brought company." The riders came like a line of crows, 5 in all, slick coats, clean boots, eyes too sharp for honest work. Brantley dismounted first, adjusting his gloves with the kind of care only men born to money ever learned. "You're a hard man to find, Granger," he said, voice smooth as poison. "But you knew we'd be back." Thomas slid from the saddle, calm on the outside, thunder boiling in his veins. "You said 2 weeks. And today's the 14th day," Brantley smiled. "We've come to collect." Clara stepped off the wagon, planting herself beside Thomas without hesitation. The children stayed silent inside the wagon bed, eyes wide. Jacob peeked out from under the canvas, clutching the handle of a rusted shovel. "I've made a payment," Thomas said. "Coining goods. Ask the merchant." Brantley waved a dismissive hand. "Too little. Too late. The land's defaulted." "You'll get your money," Clara said. "We just need time." Brantley's smile curled. "You think this is about money? This ranch sits on a future rail line. There's more gold in this dirt than you could dig in 10 lifetimes. I don't want her coin, miss. I want the deed." "No," Thomas said. Brantley's smile dropped. "Then we'll take it." The man to his left drew a revolver. Clara's breath caught. Thomas didn't blink. "You don't have the law on your side," he said. "And this ain't a town street. This is my land." Brantley nodded. "Then bury yourselves in it." The first man moved forward. Before the others could react, Thomas grabbed the axe from the wagon rail and flung it end over end. It struck the man's shoulder with a crack. The gun went off wild, bullet hissing past Clara's head. Chaos exploded. Jacob jumped from the wagon and hurled the shovel at a second rider, catching him in the knee. The man screamed, stumbled, and dropped his weapon. Thomas dove for the fallen revolver, rolled, and came up firing. One rider dropped, dust kicking up as the others scattered for cover. Clara grabbed the rifle they brought from town and stood her ground beside the wagon, firing clean and fast. Brantley ducked behind a barrel near the fence line, rage twisting his face. "This is assault," he shouted. "You'll hang for this." Thomas fired again. Chipping would near Brantley's head. "You first." The last 2 riders regrouped, one aiming for the children. Clara saw it, screamed, and shot the man through the thigh. He went down howling, crawling like a wounded coyote. Thomas charged the last gunman, caught him with the butt of the revolver under the jaw, and watched him crumple. Brantley stood alone, breath heaving, face pale. "You're finished," he spat. "Even if I die here, others will come." Thomas leveled the gun at him. "Maybe, but you won't be here to see it." Brantley raised his hands slowly, pride shattered. "You wouldn't." "I would," Thomas said, voice steel. "But I won't. Because, unlike you, I don't take what don't belong to me." He jerked his head toward the horses. "Mount up, and don't come back." Brantley hesitated, then turned and limped to the saddle. The surviving men followed, beaten and broken. They rode off into the dusk. When silence returned, it was deep and raw. Clara sat on the wagon step, hands shaking. Thomas came to her, crouched low. "You all right?" She nodded, tears threatening but held tight. "You." He looked down at his hands. Blood, dirt, gunpowder. Still breathing. Jacob ran to them, arms wide. "Mama." He didn't let him take it. Clara pulled him close, then reached for Thomas's hand. "I meant what I said," she whispered. "You're not alone." He met her eyes. "I know." Over the next 2 weeks, the ranch changed. Neighbors who'd once kept their distance came with tools, nails, and strong backs. Word spread about how Granger stood his ground, and how a woman with 5 kids helped him do it. The fences rose straight again. Coops were rebuilt. A windmill repaired. Clara taught the children to churn butter, mend trousers, boil preserves. Thomas showed Jacob how to ride. The boy fell off. Got up. Tried again. And the earth slowly began to breathe. One night, as twilight painted the sky in gold and bruises, Clara and Thomas stood by the corral. The kids were chasing fireflies. The barn doors swung open to a warm orange glow. "You ever think it'd feel like this?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not since Mary passed. Not since the land started dying." Clara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "It ain't dying anymore." "No," he said, smiling faintly. "It's just beginning." They kissed beneath the stars. No music, no ceremony. Just two people, beaten but unbroken, holding on. And maybe that's what the frontier was all along. Not land, not gold, but the will to rebuild, the grit to try again. So, what do we take from this tale? Maybe it's this. Home ain't made of timber or title. It's forged in fire and loss, in dust and love. And sometimes it comes on the back of a busted wagon with 5 children and one woman brave enough to ask for a chance. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because out here in the wild west of the soul, every story matters. And maybe, just maybe, yours is next.